All right. Hi there. My name is Dr. Galen Clavio, and I am the head of the sports media program at Indiana University. And that's actually my second career. My first career, I was a sports broadcaster. I did play-by-play of baseball games, hockey games, high school sports. I worked as a public relations director in sports. And I still do some sports broadcasting on the side. I've done some play-by-play in the last 10 years. Primarily what I do now is I podcast. I host several podcasts that are about sports and entertainment and pop culture, and I help produce some podcasts as well. So I've pretty much moved from the live sports events into more of the pre-recorded things, both audio and video. So the reason that I no longer do sports broadcasting full-time is largely because I wanted to try something different. I worked in that business for several years, and I enjoyed the broadcasting aspects of it. The non-broadcasting aspects were a little bit taxing. It took a lot of time, because I was working essentially a full 40 hours a week, and then I was working a broadcasting role on top of that. And so I really didn't have much of a life outside of work, and I wanted to teach. I wanted to help younger people learn how to do what I had done, and it's been great because I've been able to kind of get the best of both worlds through that process. I chose the career because I loved sports and I loved media. I loved broadcasting. I loved the idea of communicating with people. I loved being on microphone or on camera, and it was just a natural fit. And when I first got to college, I went to IU in the late 1990s. I got a lot of great opportunities with the student radio station and with other media entities on campus to get practice doing those things. I went and interned one summer working for a television station in their sports department. And things just kind of built from there. And it was something that I really enjoyed doing and got a lot of opportunities to do early on in my career. And that kind of snowballed into being able to do it more regularly. So when I worked in sports, it absolutely had a global aspect to it. And even though I only worked in the United States, I had a lot of exposure to people from other cultures. And it was very important that I understand those other cultures. So, for instance, when I worked in baseball as a play-by-play broadcaster, we had a lot of people on our team who were from the Caribbean or were from South America. We had a couple of Japanese players on our team. And so a couple of things that I had to do there right off the bat was learn about their culture, learn about what they were willing and interested in communicating about, and then try to translate that when I would have them on as guests on the show or on the broadcast, or when I interviewed them with the idea that I was going to put those interviews up on the broadcast later on. So it was really a balancing act in terms of trying to figure out, okay, how do I communicate with these people, and what sorts of things can I bring out of them that are going to be interesting to the audience that I'm trying to convey to here in the United States, and also, how do I make sure that I am catering to their needs? Because part of my jobs was essentially making sure that they were comfortable when talking to other people, when talking to newspaper reporters or television people. What sorts of stories could I try to translate for them and get out there in front of other people? And had some success doing that. The same thing happened in hockey with a different group of people. I had a lot of Canadians, and French Canadians especially, which is a very different kind of culture in Canada from English-speaking Canadians. But even English-speaking Canadians, there's a different set of cultural values going on there. And where I worked in hockey, I was working in Memphis, Tennessee, which is very much in the southern part of the United States. And so there were a lot of things that I had to try to process through my understanding of both Southern culture and also Canadian culture, French Canadian culture. I had a lot of players on the team from Eastern Europe, from Scandinavia. All of those things I had to process and figure out. And it was very helpful for me learning about those cultures and understanding some of the attitudes and some of the perspectives, because that made the stories that I was telling more effective. It made the players more at ease, and I think it helped the people in the markets that I was broadcasting have a better understanding of what was going on with the sport and with the individual players and coaches that were from those areas. I didn't need to know any foreign languages when I was in broadcasting, but it would have been really helpful. And it's one of those things that I wish I'd gone back and spent a lot more time on. I took 4 years of Spanish in high school. I was fairly good at it. I tested out of 8 credit hours worth of it when I got to college, but I never really pursued it much after that. And the same thing with French. I didn't really try French, but French would have been very, very helpful to know when I got into hockey. I didn't anticipate those things when I was getting ready to get into the business. I thought I was just supposed to focus on speaking English as properly as I could and as effectively as I could on the broadcast. But what I found more and more, and what I've seen develop over the course of this last 10 to 15 years, is being multilingual is incredibly important and can really open up a lot of doors that wouldn't be open otherwise, because that multiculturalism, that globalism that has come into the sports media industry as well as many other industries really puts a value on people that can communicate to multiple cultures simultaneously. So if you can work on your language skills, if you can really build up your abilities, if you can get a chance to study abroad and work on your skills there, that's something that can be tremendously valuable. And whether that's Spanish or French or Chinese or some other language where you're going to have opportunities to use it in a work environment, that's just incredibly effective and incredibly helpful to building your brand and helping you create value in yourself from a business perspective as you move forward. I think along similar lines, a very important aspect of things is taking the time to learn about cultures other than American culture that you're growing up with, or even the small segment of American culture that you're surrounded with, depending on where you're growing up. If you're from the Northeast, it's really helpful to learn about the South and learn about the cultural differences between what it's like growing up in Georgia or Alabama versus growing up in New York or Connecticut. Same thing if you're from the South. It's very important to understand the different cultures in the West Coast or in the Midwest or in the Northeast. And for anybody in the United States, regardless of where you grow up, understanding how Hispanic culture differs and the sorts of things that are the hallmarks of Hispanic culture, or how European culture exists and what components are within it. Understanding how Chinese culture exists. These things are very important because if you're going to get into the sports industry, or really any industry that has a global component to it, you're going to be asked at some point down the line to come up with ideas to help to globalize what you're doing. And if you look at sports like the NFL or the NBA and what they're trying to do to grow the game in various cultures across the globe. The NBA is very heavily invested in trying to grow the game in China. The NFL is very heavily invested in trying to grow the game in the United Kingdom and in Mexico. Well, if you can come up with ideas based in an understanding of what UK culture or what Mexican culture or what Chinese culture is all about, and use that as a way to translate the game and get people interested in the game based upon making it relevant to them and their culture, that's going to make you even more valuable within that business setting. And I think as a media person, being able to tell stories in ways that are captivating, not just to your own culture, but to other cultures, things that incorporate ideas and emotional touchstones that really resonate with people, that's really the key to getting people interested in what you're doing and what your business happens to be. It's this idea that, here I am, and I know about this game, I know about this business. Here's what you need to know, and let me put it in a category, or let me put it on a playing surface that you can understand. To me, that's the big, most important element of being multicultural and understanding different cultures. The more that you can develop that knowledge early on, the more that you keep it in mind. It's not a positive thing to just try to filter everything through your own cultural lens. What we have in the world right now is a multicultural environment. We have access to all of these different cultures via the internet. We communicate with people across national borders and across cultural borders all the time via social media. The more that you know about the cultures that you're trying to reach, and the more that you can adjust your messaging so that it more effectively reaches those people, the more valuable you are to your company, and the more options you're going to have as far as a career.